Well, hello and welcome to this video on how to configure a voice channel. Voice channels can be used for several things. The first and most obvious use is to associate a phone number with a workflow or an IVR. The second is to dedicate a line to be an agent login number, and that's when you're using agent call system and they stay connected to this number for call persistence. The third is to use the number as a CLI or caller line identifier, and this is when you want to use this number to be attached to your calls when you're making outbound calls, and so that people know where you're calling from. To configure a voice channel, we need to come to the workspace and go to the channels area. You can then go down to voice, and then we'll be able to see all of the numbers that we have available to us. These numbers can be bought from IPscape in packs of 10, and you'll see all of the numbers listed here, and any pages, if there are more than one page, you'll just see it at the bottom. So we can see we've got various columns here. If we have a look along each number, going from left to right, we can see that this number is associated with the new IVR. We've given it a name called Acme, and it's also a caller line identifier number. If we carry on down the list, we can also see that this one is used for an agent login, and so we don't want to use that for anything else. So if we were to, say, associate that with a workflow as well, what would happen is your agents would go through the workflow before they went through everything else. So you just want to, for agent login, you want to just have a dedicated line for that. For CLI, basically this number is now available as well as a CLI. So you can associate this number with a campaign, and then agents on that campaign will appear to be calling from this number. So that's how we set that up. So we can see we've got a blank one down at the bottom, and you should always check out to see what else is being used on there before you actually start editing one of these. So and this one looks as if there's nothing associated with it, so we can start to work with it. So if we go into here, we can then say that we want to give this channel a name, and this is just so that we can identify it again in a list. So we can see that this is going to be associated with, I'm just going to call it Perrin, and we can choose a workflow for it. So if we go down to here, we can choose a workflow, and that is basically our IVR, or wherever we want to send the person who calls this number. So if someone calls this number, or if someone calls the 1300 number that is mapped to this number, we are now defining what happens to that caller once they reach IPscape. So we can just pop it into a workflow, and we can add a workflow parameter. So this is a value that can be passed on to the workflow and then used to direct the person in the workflow or IVR. But I'm just going to leave that blank. Generally speaking, that setting's not filled out. So we don't want to tick use as an agent login number. For this one, we want them to go to our workflow. And use as a CLI, we can tick that or not, depending on what we want to use this number. I'm not going to tick it at the moment, and we can go to save. We go to save, that's now complete, so that is what will happen to that number once once someone calls it. So that's really configuring a voice channel. It's very, very simple, and if you do have an IVR, you will need to associate it with a phone number so that people can ring into it. If you do have an agent login, you should have that dedicated to just that. If you do want to use a CLI, it's really very simple thing to do. You can just go into any one of these and just tick that CLI box. To then, once you've then configured that as a CLI, you can go into each campaign. So we can go up to a configuration area there, go to our current campaigns and say that we want on the Perrin inbound campaign, whenever we call out for that number, the published CLI, to be a certain number. So at the moment we've got it as the organizational CLI. If I go into edit, I can change that over to be one of the other CLIs that we have published, and you can see the ones that we have the tick box next to are shown down here, and that's what people who receive our calls will see when they receive our calls. So that's really creating a voice channel. Very simple thing really. It's just good to know that it's there.